The moment is here, you can stop your search. It's Comics by Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch, and let's see what we got here. There's an interesting viewer mail. It says, "Hey Perch, simple comic discussion. Something you probably have heard in a comic shop. I know you're wanting. I know you're wanting more of those. So here goes. Why is it that either Marvel or DC characters rarely hook up with each other? You would think that given superheroes have a costumed identity, there is a lot of pressure for them to perform and save lives. You would think there was a lot more hookups. I know that comic writers think this because when you get into independent comics like The Boys, etc., characters are hooking up all the time." Okay, so first off, just very quickly here, let's not compare Herogasm to kind of the traditional DC universe, just for what it's worth. I think there's a spectrum here between kind of sexless Justice League and Orgy Town that you see in The Boys. But anyway, I'll finish the mail off. What do you think are some of the characters we most likely to hook up? And no, I don't mean the token hookup characters like She-Hulk, who will pretty much fuck anyone. Jesus. And has. Okay. Curious what you and some of your readers think. All right. So kind of two questions in there. So we'll hit the first one first. Why aren't there more hookups in comics? So we have these comics where characters are out saving the universe and doing all these kind of stuff, high pressure situations. You would think there would be more romance, or at least one night stand level romance. You would think there would be more of that. And by and large, there isn't. They'll certainly have, the relationship every now and then that will kind of come to your attention, but it usually is the same people, as you mentioned in your very colorful way. She-Hulk makes her way around. The Wasp, kind of a little bit. There was a period in the Avengers prior to Disassembled where Captain America, when he was hooking up with Scarlet Witch, is that right? Or was it? I'm trying to remember. And then the Wasp was with. I just a bunch of them were hooking up. Like there was more of an effort there. It was when Jeff Johns was writing the comic, and a few others. I think Mark Miller had a few stories in there. Anyway, people were hooking up more. And of course, over in Fantastic Four, you always have the Namers trying to fuck Sue. In DC, kind of similar things. You'd have the on and off again, Nightwing and Babs and so on. So there were characters, and then Nightwing and Starfire, and then Nightwing and probably a bunch of other people. Nightwing and Midnighter. Wait, what? No, what? No, hang on. Anyway, there's always stuff that was going on there. I think though the big reason why you don't see more hookups in comics is that whether or not it's a conscious choice, comics have been geared toward kids, or at least a younger audience. And if you really take it to its conclusion, whether it's true or not true, the idea that comics are geared toward a traditionally younger male audience, kind of teen boys and so on, the idea of heroes hooking up is not really, it doesn't fit that demographic, or at least there's the idea, I think, in a lot of writers and publishers' heads that it doesn't fit the demographic. Now, obviously, comics have gone, far beyond that and everything else, but you still see a lot of legacy in there. By the way, people called me out on this. Well, one person called me out, and he's right. I mentioned that Secret Wars is a big grab toward bringing kids into comics, and it absolutely was. But there was another one that predated that, and it was clearly G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe is a comic, and a very successful comic for Marvel, also did that, as did Transformers and the other stuff they had going on. But Secret Wars, I would maintain, was the superhero version of that, the superhero, grabbing kids and bringing them into comics. Anyway, but I think this mentality of this is our audience, this is who we're chasing, this is, this is what they like, what they don't like. It kind of goes along a little bit on that institutional knowledge that I talk about from time to time, where, in comics, there are these ideas that publishers, editors, full-timers have about just, this is how comics work. This is just what they are. This is what they do. This is what they do. And I think that there is that, there is that mentality in there around, hey, it's the prime audience for comics are not interested in the characters hooking up. And I think if you really get back to kind of the legacy of the Comics Code Authority and kind of what you could and couldn't do, and just all of these different elements meant that people steered away from hookups and romance. Just as a general comment, as a general rule, the publishers tend to just avoid it. And if you avoid it for long enough, then it eventually you lose the plot, you lose your ability to do it. And so I think that's really a lot of what was going on. Separate from that, now to the more interesting question. First of all, for all of you in the audience listening to this, does that hold water to you? Does that make sense? That's my strong feeling. Is it just combo of a lot of kind of legacy institutional knowledge, things they couldn't do, the belief that the audience didn't really want it, kind of all those different pieces. I think have all come together to deliver what we have now. For characters who should hook up. Um, well, what's interesting, and by the way, there's a slight caveat to what's being said here. You'd see characters hooking up with civilians, and I think that was also kind of the thing that the comic writers wanted to do. They wanted to have these stories where it's like, hey, Hal Jordan's dating somebody without powers, and I know all the Carol Ferris and the Star Sapphire stuff, but in general, it was we want to show the dynamic of kind of the classic Superman and Lois. One person has powers, one person doesn't have powers, and how does a person without powers interact? Is that person always in danger? Does it create a weak point for that character, etc.? And then the relationship often becomes we'll use this to build up the hero. But you kind of always got sense you're talking about superheroes dating superheroes, right? Which I think was the spirit of the original question. Um, I think there's a lot of opportunities. I mean, I think that, as I mentioned, the Avengers in the early 2000s kind of had some of that stuff going on. The X-Men, what's interesting is you get little indications that, maybe Wolverine and Storm, hooked up from time to time, or in fact, I think they did. They straight up did hook up at least once. But, you'd have kind of the relationship of Scott and Jean Grey. But um, I always found it funny in comics that they would show like the future where the superheroes have apparently all hooked up. It's like, well, this is the daughter of Thor and Black Widow, and this is the son of Hulk and the Wasp or whatever. They'd always show these characters that were the product of superhero pairing, but they rarely actually showed any indication of superheroes were hooking up in real time. It was always kind of that, well, that will happen in the future. And then they'll have kids, and those kids will be heroes with mixed powers. And so you kind of you've always felt like they skipped that middle part where organically, I think a lot of good growth could occur by having these characters slowly kind of form relationships and get together. And it felt like a logical place for a lot of it to go. But they by and large have avoided it. Often, like, very firmly avoided it. Characters I'd like to see hook up. Um, I think in the X-Men there's tons of characters that you would like to see. I mean, I liked the idea of forging a relationship with somebody. I always thought that would be a good thing. I always thought that if you really wanted to cross-pollinate the comics, it would be smart to have a core X-Men character connect with a Avenger. So Psylocke, instead of dating Angel, is dates Wonder Man, or well, maybe that's a weird one to go with, but I could Psylocke and Hawkeye be a relationship? That'd be an interesting relationship. I think there'd be some kind of interesting aspects to that. So I think that there's a bunch of stuff like that where I would have had the characters kind of cross pollinate a little bit. Had somebody from, say somebody from the Teen Titans dating the Justice League. That'd be an interesting dynamic as well, as long as the characters are all not teens. But but anyway, interesting. Okay, so that's who I would have. That's kind of what I would do. I'm curious what my audience wants. What characters do you think should hook up? Have always hooked up, and but then the other part is, I think. Do you want a long-term relationship? Do you want just the characters to kind of every now and then fuck around with each other? Like what what level of hookup are we really talking about here? That would be another kind of interesting twist to all this. Well, let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, and thanks for listening.